People always say that parents love all of their children equally. I used to believe that. Then I grew up. By the time I was 8 years old, I had already learned something that no child should ever have to understand. Love in my house wasn't unconditional. It was earned. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. If I got perfect grades, maybe mom would hug me. If I cleaned the kitchen before anyone asked, maybe dad would smile at me. If I stayed quiet, didn't complain, didn't cry, didn't ask for too much, maybe I'd finally become enough. But I never was. Because there was someone else. Someone who never had to earn anything. My stepsister, Emily. Emily was 2 years older than me. Her father had died when she was 6. A year later, my mom married my dad. Everyone always called us sisters. But it never really felt that way. Not because Emily was cruel, not at first. It was because the adults around us made sure she always came first. Whenever there was only enough money for one birthday gift, Emily got it. When Dad bought bicycles, Emily chose hers first. When Christmas came, Emily's presents filled half the living room. Mine fit inside one small gift bag. I still remember one Christmas morning. I was 10. Emily had just opened a brand new laptop. I had received a knitted scarf. My mom looked at me and smiled. "You understand, sweetheart." I nodded. Because I had learned something very important. If I said I was hurt, I was selfish. If I stayed silent, I was mature. So I stayed silent. School became my escape. I loved learning. Numbers made sense. Books made sense. People didn't. Every report card I brought home had straight A's. I'd carefully place it on the kitchen counter before Mom came home. Sometimes she'd glance at it. Sometimes she wouldn't. Usually she'd say, "That's nice." Then she'd turn toward Emily. "So, how did cheerleading practice go?" I wasn't jealous of cheerleading. I was jealous of attention. There's a difference. Dad wasn't cruel. That's what made everything harder. Cruel people are easier to understand. Dad simply wasn't there for me. If Emily needed a ride somewhere, he left work early. If I had a science fair, he was too busy. If Emily wanted expensive concert tickets, he found the money. When I needed $50 for a school competition, he sighed. Money doesn't grow on trees. A week later, Emily got a designer handbag. The first time I realized this wasn't normal. I was 12. My best friend, Lily, invited me over after school. Her mom greeted us at the door with warm cookies. She asked Lily about her day. Then she turned to me. "And how was yours?" It sounds like such a small question. But nobody had asked me that in months. I almost cried. That night, I lay awake wondering, what did it feel like to be someone's favorite? High school made everything worse. Emily became beautiful, popular, confident. She was homecoming queen, captain of the cheer squad. Teachers adored her. Neighbors loved her. My parents couldn't stop talking about her. Meanwhile, I spent my weekends working at the local bookstore. I wanted to save money for college. Dad said it was good character building. Emily didn't have a job. She didn't need one. Mom handed her cash whenever she asked. One Saturday afternoon, I came home after working an 8-hour shift. I was exhausted. As soon as I walked inside, I heard laughter. The dining room table was covered with shopping bags, designer brands, jewelry boxes, new shoes. Emily spun around. "Look what Mom bought me." She held up an elegant blue dress. "It's for graduation." Mom looked at me. "Oh, dinner's in the microwave." I smiled. "Okay." Then I quietly carried my backpack upstairs. Inside the microwave sat leftover spaghetti. Cold. Everyone else had already eaten together. Nobody even noticed I'd missed dinner. That hurt more than anything. I graduated at the top of my class. Valedictorian. Something I'd dreamed about for years. The ceremony was packed. Parents filled every seat. Students searched the crowd for familiar faces. I searched too. Mom wasn't there. Dad wasn't either. Emily had a regional cheer competition. They went to watch her instead. They said they'd make it up to me. They never did. That evening, I placed my medal on my bedroom desk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it inside a drawer. I haven't looked at it since. College acceptance letters arrived in March. I got into one of the best universities in the state. With scholarships. Not full scholarships. But enough that I only needed a little help. I walked into the living room holding the envelope with shaking hands. I got in. Mom smiled politely. "Oh, congratulations." Dad looked up from the television. "How much is it going to cost?" I explained the numbers. Silence. Finally, Dad rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry. We just can't afford that." I nodded. "I understand." Then Emily walked downstairs. She tossed another envelope onto the table. I got accepted too. She hadn't received scholarships. Her tuition would cost nearly 3 times mine. Mom hugged her. Dad laughed. "We'll figure it out." And they did. By refinancing the house, taking out loans, emptying savings. Everything. For her. That night, I sat on the back porch until almost midnight. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger takes energy. I was simply empty. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking myself, why don't they love me enough? Instead, I asked, what if they never will? Sometimes, the hardest truth is also the one that finally sets you free. The next morning, I declined my university offer. Instead, I enrolled in a community college, worked full-time, studied every night, slept 4 hours, repeated the cycle. For 3 years. No one noticed. No one asked how I was managing. No one cared. Except one person. My grandmother. Dad's mother. Grandma Rose. She lived 40 minutes away in a small white house with a garden full of roses. Every Sunday, she called me. Not Emily. Me. Have you eaten? How are your classes? Are you sleeping enough? Simple questions. But after years of silence, they sounded like love. One Sunday, she looked at me across her tiny kitchen table. You know, I've watched you your whole life. I smiled. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. They never saw you. My eyes filled with tears. She continued softly. But I do. Those 4 words changed something inside me. For the first time, I believed I wasn't invisible. I had simply been looking for love in the wrong place. The day I moved into my tiny apartment, everything I owned fit inside my old hatchback. A twin mattress, 2 suitcases of clothes, 3 cardboard boxes filled with books, a second-hand coffee maker that leaked if I filled it too high, and a photograph of Grandma Rose and me standing in her garden. That was it. No moving party. No parents helping carry furniture. No emotional goodbye. Just me. 20 years old. Starting over. Community college wasn't glamorous. Most of my classmates rushed home after lectures. I rushed to work. During the day, I worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. At night, I studied accounting. On weekends, I stocked shelves at a grocery store. There were days I survived on instant noodles because I couldn't afford anything else. But strangely, I was happier than I'd ever been. Not because life was easy. Because it was finally mine. No comparisons. No favoritism. No wondering if I'd ever be enough. Every few weeks, Mom would call. The conversations always followed the same pattern. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. Emily needs a favor. Not. How are you? Not. Are you healthy? Not. Do you need anything? Always Emily. One afternoon, she asked if I could lend Emily $500. I almost laughed. I had less than $200 in my bank account. I can't. Mom sighed dramatically. I thought sisters were supposed to help each other. I looked around my apartment. The peeling wallpaper. The thrift store table. The broken kitchen drawer I'd fixed with duct tape. I wanted to ask, who helped me? Instead, I simply said, I'm sorry. She hung up without saying goodbye. Months turned into years. I transferred to a 4-year university, using the grades I'd worked so hard to earn. This time, I received a full academic scholarship. I cried alone in my apartment when I opened the acceptance email. Not because I was sad, because there was no one to tell. I called Grandma Rose first. She answered on the second ring. I knew you could do it. Those words meant more than any celebration ever could. Emily's life, meanwhile, looked perfect from the outside. She posted vacation pictures every month. Luxury restaurants. Designer handbags. Weekend getaways. My parents appeared in almost every photo. Smiling. Laughing. Looking like the perfect family. Sometimes friends would ask, why aren't you ever in their pictures? I'd smile and say, I was probably working. It was easier than explaining the truth. The truth arrived one rainy Thursday. Dad called. That alone surprised me. He almost never called first. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. Emily's getting married. Oh. She wants you there. For a brief second, my heart actually lifted. Maybe things were changing. Maybe this was the beginning of healing. Then he continued. She was wondering if you could help pay for the wedding. Silence. I honestly thought I'd misheard him. I'm sorry. Well, you have a good job now. It would mean a lot. I closed my eyes. How much? Dad hesitated. About $15,000. I nearly dropped my phone. $15,000. I had spent years saving that money. It wasn't for vacations. It wasn't for luxury. It was my emergency fund. My future home. Security. Everything I'd worked for. For Emily? Dad sounded offended. She's your sister. I finally asked the question I'd held inside for years. When I couldn't afford college, why didn't anyone ask Emily to help me? The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Finally he said quietly, that was different. No, it wasn't. I didn't attend the wedding. Not because I was angry. Because I finally understood something. You can't keep showing up for people who never show up for you. A month later, Grandma Rose invited me over for lunch. She served homemade chicken soup. The same recipe she'd made since I was little. Halfway through the meal, she looked unusually serious. I need to tell you something. What is it? I've been sick. The spoon slipped from my hand. Sick. She smiled gently. Nothing lasts forever. No. We'll figure this out. She reached across the table. No. You'll figure your life out. I already lived mine. I couldn't stop the tears. She squeezed my hand. Promise me something. Anything. Don't spend your life waiting for people to become who they should have been. I frowned. She continued. They may never change. And if they don't, I don't want that to stop you from living. Those words stayed with me long after I drove home. A year passed. I graduated with honors. This time, I didn't even tell my parents. Grandma Rose attended. She sat in the front row wearing her favorite lavender dress. When they called my name, she stood up. She clapped louder than anyone. After the ceremony, she hugged me so tightly I thought she'd never let go. "I'm proud of you." For simple words. Yet somehow, they healed years of invisible wounds. With my degree finished, I accepted a position at a financial consulting firm. The salary was more money than I'd ever imagined earning. I rented a nicer apartment, bought reliable furniture, finally replaced the leaking coffee maker. Slowly, life became peaceful. Not exciting, not glamorous, peaceful. And after everything I'd lived through, peace felt like luxury. Then one evening, everything changed. I came home after work and found 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, 5 text messages. My stomach tightened. The last text read, "Please call us. It's urgent." I stared at the screen. For years, I had dreamed of my parents needing me. Now, I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. After nearly an hour, I finally pressed call. Dad answered immediately. His voice was shaking. "I need you to come home." "What happened?" "It's Emily." My heart skipped. "Is she okay?" "No. She and her husband. They lost everything." I remained silent. Then came the sentence I never expected to hear. "We need your help." For the first time in my entire life, my parents weren't calling because Emily wanted something. They were calling because they had nowhere else to turn. I looked out the apartment window at the city lights. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "Be careful. Because sometimes, the people who ignored you for years only remember your number when they run out of options." I didn't sleep that night. My parents' words kept replaying in my head. "We need your help." For years, I had imagined hearing those words. Back then, I thought they would make me feel victorious. Instead, I felt strangely empty. Maybe because I already knew the truth. They weren't calling because they suddenly loved me. They were calling because they had run out of choices. There was a difference. The next morning, I drove back to the house where I'd grown up. Nothing had changed. The faded blue shutters, Dad's old pickup truck in the driveway, the flower pots Mom watered every weekend. From the outside, it still looked like the happy family everyone admired. Only I knew what had happened behind those walls. I sat in my car for almost 5 minutes before walking to the front door. Mom opened it before I could knock. She looked older. Much older. Dark circles framed her eyes. Her smile was forced. "Oh, sweetheart." She wrapped her arms around me. The hug felt unfamiliar. Like wearing someone else's coat. I hugged her back anyway. Not because I trusted her. Because I didn't want to become bitter. Dad was sitting at the dining table. Stacks of unopened bills covered the wood. That alone shocked me. Dad had always been meticulous with money. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped. For the first time in my life, he looked defeated. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I nodded. "What happened?" He looked toward Mom. She avoided my eyes. Finally, Dad took a deep breath. "We mortgaged the house." My stomach tightened. "Why?" He hesitated. "To help Emily and Jason start their business." I blinked. "What kind of business?" "A luxury furniture company." I frowned. I thought Jason worked in construction. He quit. Emily said they had an amazing opportunity. Dad forced a laugh. "It wasn't amazing. They lost almost everything within 18 months. I remained silent. He continued. "They borrowed from banks. They borrowed from friends. They borrowed against the house." Then he whispered. "And now they're gone." "Gone." Mom nodded. "They left." "Where?" "We don't know." I stared at both of them. "They disappeared?" Dad nodded slowly. "They stopped answering our calls." They emptied every account they could access. They even sold Jason's truck. The room became painfully quiet. Then came the sentence that left me speechless. They left us responsible for nearly $600,000. $600,000. The number echoed inside my head. Years ago, my parents couldn't help me with tuition. Now they had risked everything for Emily. Everything. Their retirement. Their home. Their future. Mom began crying. We only wanted to help her. I looked down at the unpaid bills. Part of me felt sorry for them. Another part remembered standing in that very kitchen holding my college acceptance letter. We can't afford it. Apparently. They could afford almost anything. Just not me. Dad rubbed his temples. We thought family should help each other. The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I asked quietly, "Do you remember asking me to pay for Emily's wedding?" He looked away. Neither of them answered. Silence can be louder than words. Before anyone spoke again, the front door opened. Emily walked inside. I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes. Gone was the perfect makeup. Gone was the confidence. She looked exhausted. Thin. Her eyes were swollen from crying. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "Hi." It was the first time she'd ever sounded uncertain around me. I nodded. "Hi." She sat across from me. No one spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm sorry." Those two words surprised everyone. Especially me. I should have said this years ago. She looked down at her hands. I knew they treated me differently. I knew it wasn't fair. She swallowed hard. I liked being the favorite. The honesty caught me off guard. She continued. "I kept telling myself I'd make it up to you someday. But every year, it became easier to pretend nothing was wrong." Tears rolled down her face. "I failed you." For the first time, I saw something I'd never expected. Regret. Real regret. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell her how many birthdays I'd cried myself to sleep. How many graduations my parents had missed. How lonely childhood had been. Instead, I simply asked, "Why are you here?" She looked confused. "I came to tell them the truth." "What truth?" She looked toward Mom and Dad. "They don't know everything. Jason hadn't simply made bad investments. He'd been gambling. Not at casinos. In cryptocurrency. High-risk trading. Speculative investments. Every time he lost money, he convinced Emily to borrow more. Every time creditors came calling, he promised the next investment would fix everything. It never did. Eventually, the debt became impossible to hide. Jason disappeared, taking what little money remained, leaving Emily behind to face the consequences. "I signed papers I never read," Emily whispered. "I trusted him." She looked at me. "I thought love meant believing someone completely." I nodded slowly. "I know." The room felt heavy. Years of resentment. Years of mistakes. Years of silence. All sitting together around one dining table. Then Grandma Rosa's lawyer called. Dad answered. His expression changed immediately. His face turned pale. After hanging up, he looked directly at me. His voice cracked. "It's Mom." My heart stopped. "What happened?" Dad couldn't answer. Mom began sobbing. Finally he whispered. "She passed away this morning." Everything around me disappeared. The room. The voices. The unpaid bills. None of it mattered anymore. Grandma Rose, the one person who had loved me without conditions, was gone. The funeral was held 4 days later. Rain fell from gray skies, almost as if the world understood what we'd lost. People filled the small country church. Neighbors. Old friends. former coworkers. Everyone had a story about Grandma Rose. How she'd baked pies for sick neighbors. How she'd volunteered at the library. How she'd remembered every birthday. She had spent her entire life making other people feel seen, just as she'd done for me. After the service, the family gathered at the lawyer's office. I assumed we were simply closing her affairs. Instead, the attorney placed a thick envelope on the table. "There is one final matter." Dad looked confused. "The will?" The attorney nodded. Grandma Rose had left handwritten letters for everyone. Mom received one. Dad received one. Emily received one. Then, the attorney handed me the largest envelope. "There are additional instructions specifically for you." Every eye in the room turned toward me. I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. At the top, in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting, were the words that made my hands tremble. "My dearest granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means the time has finally come for you to know the truth about your family." I stared at the page. The room became completely silent. I had no idea that the next few minutes would uncover a secret that had been hidden for over 25 years. A secret that would explain everything and lead to the one phone call that would change all of our lives forever. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The room had gone completely silent. Even the lawyer sat quietly, waiting for me to read. I unfolded Grandma Rose's letter as carefully as if it were made of glass. Her familiar handwriting filled every page. At the top she had written, "If you're reading this, my time has come. I wish I could tell you these things in person, but I promised someone long ago that I would remain silent until the right moment." I swallowed hard. Then I continued reading. "First, I want you to know something that I should have told you years ago. None of what happened to you was ever your fault." The tears came instantly. Grandma always knew exactly what I needed to hear. The next paragraph made my heart stop. "When your mother married your father, they made a promise to each other." I frowned. Everyone in the room stared at me. I continued. "Emily had already lost one parent. Your parents decided they would spend every extra dollar, every extra minute, and every extra opportunity making sure she never felt that loss again." I looked up. Mom had already started crying. Dad closed his eyes. The letter continued. "At first, I believed they were doing something kind. But kindness without balance becomes cruelty to someone else." I paused. Grandma had seen it. She had seen everything. "I warned your father many times. You are trying so hard to heal one little girl that you're breaking the other." I slowly looked toward Dad. His face had turned completely pale. Grandma continued. "Every birthday they excused. Every recital they missed. Every achievement they ignored. Every sacrifice they expected from you. They called it temporary. Temporary became your childhood." No one spoke. Even Emily was crying now. Then came the sentence that shattered whatever defenses my parents still had. "They convinced themselves you were stronger. So they gave everything to the child they believed needed them most. They never realized the strong child also needed to be loved." Mom covered her face. Dad buried his head in his hands. For the first time in my life, they weren't defending themselves. They couldn't. The lawyer quietly handed me a glass of water. I continued reading. "I begged your father to stop comparing the two of you. He always answered the same way. 'She understands.'" Grandma had written one sentence underneath. "No child should have to understand neglect." I couldn't breathe. Because she had put into words everything I had felt for 25 years. Then the letter changed. Grandma wrote, "Now I need to tell you why I called my attorney months before my death." I looked at the attorney. He nodded quietly. "I have left my house, my savings, and my investments entirely to you." The room froze. Dad looked up immediately. Emily blinked in surprise. Mom stared at me. I looked toward the attorney. He opened another folder. That is correct. He slid several documents across the table. Grandma's estate, including her home, her investments, and decades of savings, were now legally mine. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about Grandma. She had trusted me. Not because she wanted to reward me. Because she believed I would do the right thing. Then I read the final page. It was much shorter. You now have something your parents desperately need. Please don't mistake this for revenge. Revenge feels satisfying for a moment. Peace lasts much longer. I wiped away another tear. Then came her last request. If they ever truly apologize, listen. If they don't, walk away without guilt. The final sentence broke me completely. I was always proud to call you my granddaughter. I couldn't read another word. I folded the letter carefully. The lawyer quietly collected the remaining papers. No one moved. Finally, Dad stood. He walked toward me slowly. For the first time in my life, he looked unsure, almost frightened. I'm sorry. Just 2 words. Words I had waited 25 years to hear. But hearing them didn't erase 25 years. I failed you. His voice cracked. I kept telling myself, you were independent. You didn't complain. You always smiled. He looked directly into my eyes. I thought that meant you were okay. I answered softly. I smiled, because nobody listened when I cried. Dad closed his eyes. His shoulders began shaking. I had never seen my father cry before. Not once. Until that day. Mom walked over next. She couldn't even speak at first. Finally she whispered, I don't deserve forgiveness. I didn't answer. Because she was right. Forgiveness isn't something anyone deserves. It's something someone chooses. Emily stood last. She looked completely different than the confident girl I grew up with. I owe you my childhood. I frowned. She shook her head. No. I stole yours. I immediately interrupted. No. She looked surprised. You were a child too. We didn't create this. The adults did. For the first time, Emily smiled through tears. It wasn't a happy smile. It was relief. Over the next few weeks, I met several times with the attorney. Grandma's estate was substantial. Far more than I ever imagined. Enough to change my future forever. Enough to completely save my parents from bankruptcy. If I wanted. Every night I asked myself the same question. Should I help them? Logic said no. They had made their choices. They had ignored me, dismissed me, forgotten me. Again and again. Emotion whispered something different. If Grandma were here, what would she do? Then one evening, as I sat in Grandma's empty garden, watching the wind move through her roses, my phone rang. Dad. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. His voice sounded weaker than I'd ever heard. The bank called today. They're taking the house. I looked across the garden. Everything Grandma had built, every flower, every memory, seemed to whisper the same lesson. Love isn't measured by what people deserve. It's measured by who you choose to become. I closed my eyes, then quietly said, Dad, I'll come tomorrow. He started crying before I could say anything else. Neither of us realized that tomorrow, one final phone call would arrive. A phone call that none of us saw coming. And it would change every single one of our lives forever. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I barely slept. Grandma's letter sat on my kitchen table, folded neatly beside a cup of untouched coffee. I read the last line one more time. Choose peace. Not revenge. Not punishment. Peace. I slipped the letter into my purse and drove toward my parents' house. The same house where I'd spent years feeling invisible. By sunset, everything would be different. The bank representative was already there. A middle-aged woman in a navy blazer stood on the front porch, holding a thick folder. Dad looked exhausted. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying. Neither of them spoke when I walked up. The representative explained everything calmly. The mortgage was months behind. The final notices had expired. Unless the outstanding balance was paid immediately, foreclosure proceedings would begin within days. Dad simply nodded. He looked like a man who had already accepted defeat. I asked the representative one question. If the balance is paid today, can the foreclosure be stopped? She nodded. Yes. I looked at my parents. Neither of them knew what I was about to do. I opened my purse. Inside was the cashier's check the attorney had prepared the day before. I handed it to her. I'll pay it. The representative reviewed the documents. A few moments later, she smiled politely. This will stop the foreclosure. She collected her paperwork, shook my hand, and left. The entire conversation had taken less than 10 minutes. But it erased months of fear. Dad stared at me. You saved the house. I nodded. For Grandma. Not for the house. Not for the past. For her. Because I knew exactly what she would have wanted. Mom broke down completely. She wrapped her arms around me, crying so hard she could barely breathe. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I simply felt like myself. That afternoon, we sat around the dining room table. The same table where I had once placed my straight-A report cards. The same table where my college dreams had quietly died. Only now, no one was pretending. Dad looked directly at me. I need to tell you something. I waited. I've spent years blaming circumstances. Emily needed us. We didn't have enough money. We were stressed. He shook his head. Those were excuses. The truth is, I stopped paying attention. I kept believing there would always be time to fix things later. He looked around the room. There wasn't. Mom spoke next. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect another chance. But I hope. She paused. I hope one day, when people ask how many children I have, I'll deserve to say 2. Silence filled the room. I wasn't ready to answer. Healing doesn't happen because someone apologizes. It happens because actions begin matching words. Just then, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. Hello. A calm male voice answered. Is this? He confirmed my name. Yes. My name is Detective Harris. Every conversation around the table stopped. There has been an accident. My stomach tightened. Who? It's regarding Jason. Emily's face turned completely white. The detective explained that Jason had been living under a false name in another state. He'd been avoiding creditors for months. While driving late one night, he lost control of his vehicle during a storm. He survived, but he was seriously injured. Before surgery, he requested one phone call. Not to his parents, not to a lawyer, to Emily. The hospital couldn't reach her. So investigators traced emergency contact records until they found our family. Emily couldn't move. She simply stared at the floor. Finally she whispered, I'll go. I stood. I'll drive you. She looked at me in disbelief. You don't have to. I know. But you shouldn't be alone. The drive took nearly 3 hours. Most of it passed in silence. Halfway there, Emily finally spoke. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Why are you helping me? I thought about it, then smiled faintly. Because someone once helped me when I needed it. Grandma. I nodded. She taught me that kindness isn't earned. It's chosen. Emily cried quietly for the rest of the drive. Jason looked nothing like the confident man from their wedding photos. Machines surrounded his hospital bed. His arm was heavily bandaged. When he saw Emily, he immediately started crying. I ruined everything. She didn't interrupt. He admitted everything. The gambling, the lies, the forged signatures, the false promises, the stolen money. I kept thinking one more investment would fix everything. It only made everything worse. Emily listened, then quietly said, I forgive you. He looked shocked. But I can't spend the rest of my life cleaning up your choices. She removed her wedding ring, placed it on the bedside table, then walked away. Without yelling, without revenge, without looking back. Sometimes, walking away peacefully is the strongest decision you'll ever make. Months passed. Slowly, life settled into something new. Dad retired. Not because he wanted to, because he finally realized money wasn't the most valuable thing he'd almost lost. Mom started volunteering at the same community center Grandma had loved. Every Saturday, she baked cookies for children. She said it reminded her of everything she'd missed. Emily found work as an elementary school teaching assistant. The expensive clothes disappeared. The luxury lifestyle disappeared. Instead, she discovered something she had never experienced before: contentment. She even apologized to me again one afternoon. This time, without tears, without excuses, just honesty. I can't change our childhood, but I hope we can choose a different future. I smiled. So do I. One spring afternoon, nearly a year after Grandma's funeral, Dad invited me over for dinner. As I walked through the front door, I noticed something strange. 2 framed photographs sat above the fireplace. One was Emily's graduation picture. The other was mine. The photograph Grandma had secretly taken after my college graduation. Dad noticed me looking. I found it in your grandmother's house. He smiled softly. It should have been here all along. I couldn't speak. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. Sometimes, it's simply making room for someone who should have been there from the beginning. After dinner, I walked alone into the backyard. The old oak tree was still there. The swing Dad had built years ago gently moved in the breeze. I sat down and looked toward the sunset. I realized something. For years, I believed my story was about being the daughter my parents never chose. I was wrong. It was about becoming the woman I chose to be. Because if I had spent my life chasing revenge, I would have remained trapped in the past. Instead, I carried Grandma's lesson forward. People will disappoint you. Some will fail you in ways that leave scars for years. But you don't have to let their choices decide the kind of person you become. A few weeks later, I visited Grandma Rose's grave. I placed fresh white roses beside her headstone. Then I smiled. You were right. The strong child still needed love. I looked up at the bright blue sky. But thanks to you, she finally found it.